So welcome, Elke, to this conversation about co-creating the third attractor. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, I was looking forward, and we don't know each other well. We probably saw each other sometimes at an integral conference, but and I find it very interesting to speak to people that I actually don't know, and but that where I know that they probably have similar interests, and it's just I'm always curious what other people think about how we create a better world. And I start, as you know, with one question. Do you know what the third attractor is, what it means, and can you probably put it in your own words, and then we take it from there?
Well, I know the idea by Daniel Schmachtenberger, as he
Yeah.
has framed it, as I have read about it by him, meaning like a vision of a good life, to put it very simply, of systems being in balance, as a pull from the future, so to speak, towards systems that are in better balance, essentially. And so he calls it the third attractor, referring to two other attractors,
Hmm.
which are less positive. And that's the point where it didn't land for me, actually, I have to say, because for me,
Mm.
an attractor is something that is attractive, right? That attracts because it exerts this pull from the future, as I said. And he frames it, if I get it correctly, that the other attractors are collapse or control, right? The two
Yeah.
alternative roads that, I mean, humankind could take in a way, like
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out with the third attractor. And I wonder, is this an attractor, or is attractor like a appropriate term to describe that? Because that's not attractive to me, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I speak about attractor, I more think about something that really, really pulls me, right? Or that really has a strong, like a magnetic force. And I know that term for a long time. And you might have come across my book, where I go through a number of very well-known thinkers, inspirational thinkers of integral politics. And the first one is Sri Aurobindo, the Indian mystic and
Mm.
politician. And he uses that, I don't remember if he uses the exact term, but he uses the idea of an attractor in the sense that it's like a law of nature that life wants to develop, right? All life
Yeah.
strives to evolve, to develop further, to become more alive. Essentially, it's
Mhm.
very simple definition, and that therefore I find it very convincing. And that's an attractor in the sense that he says it's like a force of nature, like a law of nature. We cannot really act against that because it's so strong. This urge of everything human, of everything alive, of becoming more alive and to grow and to expand in a way. That, I mean, we can act against it, of course, but we cannot successfully act against this drive in the long run, so to speak. And that for me is an attractor. And Aurobindo frames this when he speaks about, I mean, I call it integral politics. He hasn't exactly used those terms, I guess, but he was the first person to combine spirituality with politics and this idea of human unity as a big attractor, right? As a big
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
vision that might be something that everybody on this planet might or should find attractive in some sense, and that humankind could move towards. So that's my reference when I think about an attractor, and then all the other integral thinkers have more or less followed this idea, and I like that because it's an attractive thing, and I mean that's what I do in my work pretty much to try and get across this idea that not just the idea actually, but really the sensation with people who might not be familiar with integral thinking yet, But if you put them into a space or a conversation that is held in an integral way, meaning holistic, deep listening with all the senses and so on and so forth, people can sense it bodily.
Yeah.
They can sense that this is different from what they know from more regular, more usual, more modern types of being together in a conversation. And that's what I find attractive also to get across this idea that this feels good. It makes you more alive to be in this kind of space. It makes you happy, ultimately. And so people, if they have sensed it for the first time, they tend to want to come back and get more of it. So it's an attractor. And that's my understanding of how I use this term and this concept and this
Yeah, that's
idea of
beautiful.
integral politics being something attractive, because it fulfills or it meets so many deeply held needs of so many people who are so frustrated with politics as usual, as we call it, with the politics that we know when we switch on television and so on and so forth. Because it's so hollow, it's so superficial, it's so reductionist, because it doesn't have this holistic approach.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I basically totally agree with you. That's for I see the same thing as the third attractor or as the attractor, and I also can see why you say the first and the second are actually not attractors. But then again, when you look into the world, there are quite a lot of authoritarian leaders that are elected by the people. So there must be a attraction in having a strong leader that kind of shows the way that relieves us from the responsibility of co-creating a better world. Yeah, and this idea that somebody, an authoritarian figure, could know how it should all be is something that could be seen as attractive. It's not obviously not my attractor, but that I can see, and also the chaos. Like we had a retreat in January about the third attractor here, and we did some voice dialogue, big mind work, where we, for example, went into the voice of the one that would want to have an authoritarian leader, because you don't have to then
Do it all.
use
You
your
can,
own responsibility, exactly,
yeah.
and also into the voice of the one that just wants to go away. I just want to do my own thing, go away with politics or co-creating or anything. I just want to be left alone by the government, by authorities, by anybody that wants anything from me. And we seem to have this in ourselves, probably most of us. But the third attractor that you are uh, designing or describing is very much also close to my heart. The one that where we recognize there is something, a thing, something in the universe that drives the universe, that drives the creation of the universe.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally relate to what you say, and I can see also that many people seem to want to, give away their responsibility and their power to the big hero or the big leader or something. And in a way, yeah, I can relate to that being called an attractor, but it's a different type of attractor. It's a
Yeah,
completely different type, because this is not about growth and further developing and evolving all your inner possibilities and potentials and so on and so forth, as in this description of Aurobindo. But it's more about just fleeing, freezing, maybe escaping from a difficult situation, turning away and closing your eyes, and you're just giving up, more or less.
exactly.
I mean, that's a choice of many people, and in some situations that's understandable, maybe, if you're in
Yeah,
over your heads. But I wonder if that's a long-term solution or a long-term viable strategy. I think it's
probably
not.
not. No, no.
So I'd rather stick with the the positive
Yeah,
type
yeah.
of factor.
So what are you doing in terms of integral politics? I would love to hear a little more about what your work is about, what you feel works and what doesn't, where you still struggle, where you feel like there is progress in terms of integral politics.
What am I doing? I'm a political scientist by training, a social and political scientist. So my long-term activity has been to study societies, to study politics, to try to understand what's going on and in which direction are we moving collectively, and what would help us to move into a positive direction, meaning further development, better dealing with complexity, and so on and so forth. And I've tried to do that at university. I've done my PhD and all the rest of it. But at the time, obviously, it was difficult to gain grounds and to make build a career on integral grounds. So I managed to get through this qualification phase without selling my heart, so to speak. That was
That's
the big,
good.
without selling my my
Yeah,
identity.
yeah.
I used the four quadrant model in my dissertation, but that's it, right? Just to
Yeah.
frame in which quadrant my work is located. And then only after my PhD was finished, I started taking up the developmental levels and go through the materials that I'd analyzed in my PhD, which was about Russia's not dealing with her Soviet past and what political implications does that have, right? So I really did a
Oh, yeah.
discourse analysis of a court trial that at the time was about the biggest occasion where society debated about, well, how shall we relate to the Soviet past? So it was a good opportunity to collect data and to look at, well, how is discourse working in this society? What positions do we find? What majorities do we find? What strategies of argumentation do we find? And so on and so forth. So to look at that through a developmental lens was quite interesting, but I only did that like after the PhD. And it was quite interesting because I find that, and that's part of the work that I've done over the last decade, so to speak, is to then combine the integral framework with my social science and political
Yeah.
science work, right? And especially using those developmental lenses and those developmental models for actually looking at specific social, political, or historic topics and try to make sense of them using this additional lens, which is normally not used in the social sciences, at least at the time. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
completely not used at all. So I did that quite a bit, and actually the topic of politics of history is quite a good example, I think, because it's all about the questions that you would also have in identity development, where it's all about who am I, how do I relate to others, how do I relate to myself, how do I identify in terms of, well, where does the other start and where do I stop? What right does the other have? And so on. How do I relate to my environment? So those are classical identity questions that you would also find in politics, where societies or nations or political entities try to build an identity around who are they,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
do they want to go, and who are their enemies? Are there any enemies, and so on and so forth. So especially a society like Russia in transition that was really struggling, and it's still struggling. And at the time, it has parked this issue for quite some time now, because there's no more free discourse, more or less. But at the time in the 90s, it was a huge issue, like to find a new identity for Russia after the breakdown of the Soviet Union. So that was really huge. And so that was quite interesting to study, like what patterns of argumentation, what patterns of meaning making, of reasoning, of defining their identity are being used by different groups, and then to put them in and to use the frameworks that are there from self-development theory. And if you know those theories and those models, you recognize immediately certain patterns.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
was quite interesting to apply this to specific political issues. And I've done that with several other topics as well. So yeah, that was my try to to combine the integral lens with academic work. It hasn't resulted in a big career yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still not
It
80, so maybe it will still come. And somebody
Yeah.
funds a big professorship for integral political science. That's still my big dream out there. So that's part of my work. Yeah.
Is there any party in Germany that is having a little bit more of integral consciousness?
Not that I know of. No.
Yeah.
Oh, not integral consciousness. There used to be a party, but that's also some decades ago, which called itself the Violets. They used the
Yeah, I
color
remember
violet.
that
You remember
actually.
that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we cooperated actually with them in the year 2008 when we organized the first conference of integral politics in the German-speaking area, which was a co-hosted thing between the Violets in Germany, the Swiss party Integral Politics, and
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
Austrian group, the Holland group. So
Yeah.
I got in touch with them quite a bit, but we found that the Violets are more spiritual than integral, so they're not really integral
They were a little
in
bit
the full sense of the word.
left quadrant
But I mean,
leaning.
yeah, I mean that's okay. I mean we all develop,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this is something that we collectively have to in how can I say, have to create into being. There's no template for this into
No.
politics. It doesn't exist anywhere except maybe in this little Swiss party, which is not a party anymore now. But otherwise,
Yeah,
collectively,
and they were not very successful either. It's
we
a
have
very
to invent it into
hard
being. So
territory. Yeah. Because isn't one of the tricky things that if we would really want to approach many of the topics in an integral way, it's such a paradigm shift from how things are done now
yeah.
that it's hard to crack that nut open, no? Like it's such a different way of thinking.
Yeah, it's very nice that you put it like that because that's my core term that I work with. We need to have a paradigmatically new
Yeah,
approach in politics, and I try to describe this new paradigm by actually looking at what are the principles that really make up for a new quality that you can sense and that you can feel when you walk into an integrally held political space. And I don't know
exactly.
if you want to hear the whole list, but there's three
Yes,
principles
I want to hear
that
some
are,
of the
yeah,
pieces that are on the list.
that are, so to speak, the essence or the best
Yeah,
of, or the core contents that I came up with when I went through those 10 inspirational thinkers from Aurobindo to quantum social science, so to speak.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there are five substantial principles that really describe the essence of this new approach. And then there are five more how-to methodological principles. How do we put this into practice, right? Because those two are interlinked very closely. And if you don't consider the how, the what will not be successful. And that's already part of the integral approach, I would say, to always look at the how are we showing up, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
are we
yeah, yeah,
walking our
exactly. The
talk, so
showing
to
up.
speak.
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, we all know politicians who are good at holding nice speeches, but who don't embody what they preach. So the first principle is very obviously including more perspectives, right? And the aim is, of course, to open up as far as you can. We all know that we cannot have all the perspectives because we're all perspectival beings, so we all have our blind spots. But the idea and the aim must be to include as many perspectives as possible, to have a picture that is as full as possible. So there are many different
yeah.
approaches and methods for doing that. I love to work with deep democracy because the inner dimensions are ones that are typically neglected and ignored. So those are connected to
What is deep
feelings.
democracy? I don't know the term.
Yeah,
Can you
deep
expound on
democracy
that?
is an approach that goes back to Arnold Mendel's process psychology that was developed in the, I don't know, was it 70s, 80s or something like that. It's a psychological approach, but Mendel himself was always, I mean, he was a quantum physicist,
Oh, yeah,
interestingly. So he always had this very systemic perspective and this very, how do things fit together, right? How can we
yeah,
have big picture and how does the inside and the outside connect? and
Yeah.
how can we work with the inside psychology in order to change the outside our systems, right? So
Yeah.
that was very fascinating to me as an approach, and he then came up with an approach called world work, using psychological approaches like working with shadow, for example, as a way to heal communities, as a way to look at
Mm.
blind spots in societies, and so on and so forth, and to really work with these in protected spaces, and in this way to heal those blind spots by giving them a more loving kind of attention, namely. So
Wi-
that's a very brief way of describing. There are
wi-
different strands of deep democracy nowadays that slightly differ with their methodological approaches and so on and so forth. But they all would look at shadow material, and where are
With
we
the
not
promise,
walking?
then let me just ask you to understand, with the promise that when you do this shadow work, the collective shadow work, you get to better decision making also, because when you say
Yeah,
deep democracy, that the democratic process then is more
it's
more
more
successful,
in
more
integrity. It's about bringing more
yeah,
integrity to politics, because our politics right now is very superficial.
yeah,
We turn our eyes away when conflict arises. Usually we don't want to look at it. Usually we're overwhelmed by deep conflict. So we try to, I mean, modern politics typically tries to solve conflict by money, right? Pour some
yeah,
money and that's it. But they don't look at the deeper layers of conflict. Conflict is
money
always
or weapons.
has to do with relationships, like some relation that is not in balance. So we have to
Yeah,
look at the relationship. Somebody has not been seen or heard or something. So that's the point where we have to look at, and so we have to make space for this to be able to be addressed. So we have to make safe spaces, which is also not a typical competence in modern politics, because it's very much about winning, winning over,
yeah,
competing, and so on. It's not about making mistakes. It's not about showing your vulnerability, for example. So it's a
yeah,
completely different paradigm, really.
yeah,
Deep democracy, offers a number of very nice methods for working gently, working with those shadow sides, with those conflict material. Because one of the phrases by Arnold Mandel that I like a lot is, he says, conflict is the best way to community, right? If you don't escape conflict, but if you walk right into it and hold it and be able to hold the pain sometimes, and to sit in the fire, that's one of his book titles, and to stand the fact that it might hurt
yeah,
until it stops hurting, because you've seen it all and you have experienced it all, then it will stop and then the conflict will be over. Yeah, so
yeah,
so that's just one method that is, I find, very helpful for this first principle, to include more perspectives and to be really
yeah, yeah.
serious about more perspectives, not just numerically more perspectives, more minorities and so on, but really look at what did we not want to see, right? Where is
Yeah, yeah.
the shadow? Where is yeah.
And does this scale, or what is the size of these
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
a very
processes?
good question. Of course, working with groups is limited when you do it in a physical way. And yeah, you would want to do it physically, because there is so much more involved
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
than in online virtual settings. But there are also methods that you can use virtually. I mean, different topics. It's all about method, really. Yeah, there are so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
methods for communicating and for being in contact and in relation in a different way.
yeah.
So does it scale? I mean, the Mendel school scales quite a bit. He has worked with really large forums. He calls it open forum, his core method. And I haven't been in one because he died before I discovered deep democracy. But as far as I know, he has worked with a couple of hundreds of people in one setting. But that's it, as much
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
facilitators can hold, essentially. And but I mean, as we all know, reality is fractal, right? And if you work
Yeah,
with
yeah.
one fractal, things change also outside that fractal, because it's a systemic reality,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
also one of the principles, more or less, that the small and the big are intertwined through fractal relations,
yeah,
and
yeah.
part of the
Holonic.
quantum view
Yeah,
of reality, essentially.
yeah.
So that's principle one, more perspectives. And
Very
you
good.
see, there's a whole
Yeah,
universe behind this, right?
yeah,
Once you open the door, there's space for like, you can dive in and come back 5 years later, because there's so much
yeah,
to.
yeah. I find that a very interesting one also in my work. When at Icon conference, I talked about the insight from my third attractor conversations, and the way I talked about it is that I pulled out 13 paradoxes that came up in all the conversations, because for me paradoxes are very much part of this multi-perspectival view, because there are things that we want to hold in ourselves that cannot just be negotiated or brought together. It's also like integral consciousness. Also, for me, it means to be able to hold paradoxes that seem,
Ambiguity.
yeah, yeah, ambiguity and real paradoxes. Is this right? Is this right? No, it's probably both. Situational in different contexts, but just to be able to hold it without this
Yeah.
need to collapse it either into the middle or into one or the other direction. No?
Yeah, that's a very nice way to frame it. And I have that somehow in my principles 9 and 10.
Yeah,
9 being really to work with the latest science, which is quantum physics, more or less, which is, I mean, it's not new anymore. It's 100 years old, more or less, but it hasn't arrived in the thinking of the social sciences, for example. We still hold this linear view where A and B factors
yeah, yeah,
somehow relate, and it's not a complex thinking, more or less,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So to really take this seriously, and like, for example, Mendel does, and really use those fractal approaches also to actually work with social reality. So that's
hmm,
one part. Take the latest science seriously. So what does that imply for politics and for society?
hmm,
But then at the
yeah, yeah,
same time, principle number 10, be aware that you know nothing at all, and make space for not knowing, and
yeah,
relax into this. Yeah, I mean, the more we know, the more we know that we don't know. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So to really relax into, okay, this is as far as we have gotten with our science, and that's for me part of the nice images of integral that Ken Wilber has spoken about, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yeah, it's a vision that we will never achieve, because
yeah,
it's a vision and we will never have the full picture. And
yeah,
to have this in mind, that it's always, yeah, we can always try to approach it and to come closer and to become more whole, but we will never be there. Otherwise, it would be totalitarian, at
yeah,
least as
yeah,
long as we are humans. And so
yeah,
this
yeah.
this principle of humility and of accepted that we don't know it all is also
Yeah,
very
yeah.
important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's this constant letting go and wanting to know more, and then letting go again of what we think we know, and then be open for new insights. And it's, yeah, I totally agree.
Which is often where the magic happens, by the way, right? If we
Yeah,
study and study in our left brain and then we let go and we take a shower, sometimes, aha, the abduction happens and the
absolutely.
new idea crosses our
Yeah,
mind. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's exactly where creativity actually can show itself. So back to the number two principle.
Yeah. So
What is number two?
the number two is um, considering action logics as being in some kind of development, right? We all know the developmental frameworks, and but really to take this seriously in politics is something really innovative. And if we take this research seriously, which comes from psychology, obviously, but it applies to everybody, yeah, to anybody, anybody that develops potentially or not, and so
Yeah,
this applies to everybody in society, including politicians, including voters, including citizens, and to really take this as a fact and to look at, okay, so where are people in their development? What can we expect? What is the most mature behavior we can expect from somebody at this stage, right?
Yeah.
And again, if you know those models, it's very easy to spot roughly
Mm-hmm.
where somebody is when they behave in certain ways or they say certain things. Trump, for example, very easy to detect if you know those models. But I mean, the political world has taken a long time to make sense of this, right? Same thing with Putin, because it's so uncommon for somebody in such a high leadership position to be at such a low level of ego development that people
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
said, oh, there must be something really smart about him that we don't get. We don't get how he operates. But the opposite is true, right? And if you know those
Yeah.
model sets, it's completely obvious. And this is so important to be aware of what a leader, so to speak, what's their action logic that they operate from. I mean, you can always take them to the next step, maybe, but not like 5 steps further
No.
than what they are. And so that's an important condition, I think, for interacting with people at different levels, for cooperating with them. I mean, we cannot always choose with whom to cooperate, but we have to be aware with who our cooperation partner is, right? And
Yeah,
how,
yeah, and what drives them? No,
I
it's
mean,
in the end, it's knowing what drives them. What is their value system, and what
and what attracts them, what's their attractor
exactly,
mechanism. And we see now that the Western politicians seem to have gotten it more or less for Trump. Like
and bring
you
him
have to
gold.
flatter him all the time and so on and so forth. So but it's not really working yet. But anyway,
Yeah,
so that's something to have in mind also in when you analyze politics. Also when you analyze how constituencies behave, voters behave. I mean, somebody
yeah,
like Putin would not have been successful in a more democratic, in a more liberal country. And that, of course, tells us something about where the society stands in their own cultural development.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's of course one very important dimension to look at things always also through the lens of development and the lens of increasing complexity, of meaning making and of reasoning and of understanding the world and acting on it.
Yeah. I have a question here that I am often thinking about. There are people out there in the integral and meta integral world that start to say this whole developmental thinking is in itself a modern thing, an orange thing, and modernist thing. This idea of development to higher and higher stages, and that it actually doesn't work. I'm not of that opinion, and I hear you also still defending the developmental stages as a way to understand what happens in societies and in people. But there is this argument out there, and it's very persistent. I don't know if you have come about people with this argument, and what is your take on it or your counter argument?
Well, that's of course a huge discussion to go into, but I'm aware that there's criticism essentially also from the side of indigenous perspectives
Yeah.
that might hold different ideas of. I don't know if they use the term development at all, but wisdom, for example, they certainly have elders and they have people that they value a lot, that would have natural leadership positions because of their wisdom, because of their experience or whatever.
Hmm.
And so it would be an interesting conversation, of course, to look at, well, what makes up those people, what makes up their wisdom, and to include that into developmental models. And I think there is more research being done in this area, but I'm not into this right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a valuable add-on that we need to have in mind, especially now with the whole situation of the planet, more or less, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very clear that the modern way has led us to the degree of destruction that we're at. And I'm currently reading the stuff by here, Vanessa
Oh yeah,
Machado de
Antoinette.
Oliveira, which is
Yeah,
an indigenous perspective, and which
yeah,
pretty much
yeah.
uses this idea that we have to become indigenous again in some way, in the sense that we have to reconnect again with all those parts
Yes.
that have been
Yeah,
separated. As Otto Scharmer says, modernity is a project of separation, right?
yeah,
From ourselves, from each other, from nature. And so there's a lot of wisdom in reconnecting, in also studying what does that mean, right? To communicate with plants and with other forms of
yeah,
life
yeah, yeah.
on, which is present in those communities, in those indigenous communities.
Yeah.
To a very, very high degree. And so there's a lot for us to learn. So I'm aware that those developmental models are maybe in a way missing out a lot, but at the same time for the Western world, they, at least for the examples that I gave, they are very
They
helpful. At
work.
least they are
Yeah.
much, it's much more helpful to use them than to ignore them. And so I think whatever they can contribute, we should
No,
be.
I agree. And also, I mean, we cannot go back. Even we cannot go back to indigenous cultures. That we just have too many people and too many cities and too much happening. So we have to find a way forward to integrate this old
Forward to
wisdom again.
become, yeah.
Yeah,
There's a
in
guy,
it.
in Germany. I mean, he's not in Germany, but he's a German, Lukas Buchholz, who has studied the Kogi people quite intensively from Colombia. And he's now set up a Timeless Wisdom Academy for actually teaching the Kogi wisdom to the the Western world, more or
Yeah,
less. And he has just brought out this book, which has the title "How Can We Become Indigenous Again?" So it's a way
yeah,
forward towards
yeah,
a mindset and a way of understanding reality that is more connected, that is
yeah,
based on the idea that everything is connected and that we are part of this larger metabolism that yeah that breathes us, so to speak. And
yeah.
so there's a lot of research, I think, to do, and a lot of learning for us in this. How can we become indigenous again, in the sense that how can we reconnect again to our own places, right? To our
Yeah,
own
yeah.
environments. It's not about, becoming like the Colombians and or like the Kogi, because they have their setting. And indigenous living, I think, means to be connected to your environment and to your setting, and to be present where you are,
Yeah, yeah, and also
whatever that
to
means.
reintegrate human beings into nature, because we have
Yeah.
taken us outside of nature, outside of the world, and it's a lot about reintegration into nature, because we are nature. We are as much part of this nature as every tree and every plant. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I can go to principle 3,
Yes.
which is the famous work by Otto Scharmer, essentially, and Ken Wilber has also famously named this in his typology. It's about states, right? States of awareness, states of being,
Yeah.
and I find it very inspiring to take the work of Otto Scharmer when looking at societies, at politics, at how we do things together, because
Hmm.
that's much closer than Ken Wilber's work in the upper left quadrant. Sharma's work is more located in the lower left quadrant. Like, how do we do things together, and how present are we with each other? So
Yeah.
this quality of actually just being aware of how present are we when we speak, for example, or when we have a group conversation. And he has distinguished those famous modes of downloading, debating, dialogue, and so on. And that's something
Hmm.
that you can easily learn. You can easily
Hmm.
learn to distinguish. And everybody has this experience from all sorts of everyday situations. And if you know the model behind, and if you know the categories, and if you know that you can create this kind of quality by behaving in this way, by
Yeah. Yeah.
facilitating a group in this way, we get completely different outcomes than when we are in a
Yeah.
downloading mode, as we are most of the time in politics, as usual, in the modern politics. So that's another core competence or a new dimension of just of awareness, that if you're literate, so to speak, in this dimension, you can have much more impact and be much more successful in the way that co-creation
Absolutely.
can work than if you're not aware of this dimension. So again,
Yeah.
very fundamental, and it's a whole universe behind that.
It is. We are practicing this in the work I'm doing as intersubjective dialogue, where we enter with groups this intersubjective space that you are pointing to, that is beyond the individual, but it includes the individual, and it creates this big space where creativity actually can flow.
Yeah, so to come back to your earlier question, what am I doing? So the first part was the more scientific work, but right now I'm not saying I'm done with science, but my feeling is we have all the science we need. We need to get it out there into practice. We need to put it in service of real transformation, of the transformation we need to see. And so I'm more after really trying to create those public spaces where people can experience a different paradigm of doing politics, right? Of talking
Yeah.
to each
Yeah.
other, of being with your co-citizens, and of talking about a political issue, for example, and to really, host different dialogue formats. We have a number of them going on here in the local area. For example, a depolarization format that meets every month, in a 3-hour setting,
Oh,
where we
nice.
run them
Yeah.
through different methods,
Yeah.
the aim is really to bring people into conversation that wouldn't normally talk to each other, or not
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
go into the same room, because
Oh, that's
there are some
wonderful. Yeah.
topics that are really polarized, probably everywhere, but there's something you can do about it. And
Yeah.
usually people love the experience. For some it's quite irritating, for some it's a challenge. I remember one situation where we always start with some kind of warm-up, icebreaker exercises, speed datings and stuff like that, where people really just start chatting and start getting to know each other. So we had this couple of two women that had a check-in together, like about a personal question, like how are you doing, or something like that, very banal.
Yeah.
And then later in the evening, they found out that they are at the very opposite spectrums of the political issue we were talking
Oh,
about,
really? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for the person who was progressive, it was a shock to her to notice that she found this woman at the opposite end of the spectrum, that she found her nice. That she
Nice. Yeah. 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 Exactly.
so
That's beautiful.
it took
Yeah.
her a while to process this experience. So we call this positive irritation. And if that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think goal
Yeah. That's perfect.
accomplished. Yeah.
At the moment when people go into relationships, it's much more difficult to really polarize, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so it all works, with building community, with building personal relationships, and understanding the other person's story. It's quite simple,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
but it
Are you
doesn't
doing
take place.
are you doing this with established parties also? Are
No.
the
No,
established parties
politics
part
stays
of
out.
this?
Now, parties
Okay.
are, I think parties are actually more part of the problem than part of the solution.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're doing this with ordinary people. I mean,
Yeah.
we wouldn't invite parties out if they were interested, but so far I think we didn't have anybody from a party, because I mean their raison d'être, their existential identity is to be against the
Is
other, right? That's how the
yeah.
system operates, and I think the system is dysfunctional at this point, because we
Yeah.
need cooperation right now across the board. We need to focus on what we have in common and not what separates us. So it's an outdated modern system, and that's why I think parties are more or less blocking the necessary change we would need. So we would rather have an interest to work around parties and to make them superfluous, or as Vanessa Machado de Oliveira would say, to hospice parties as an outdated
Yeah. Yeah.
institution, and to let it die peacefully,
Yeah.
not fight
Yeah.
them, but really just acknowledge, okay, this was yesterday, now we need something different.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I mean, there are also attempts to host transpartisan events and stuff like that, because the parties are still there. I mean, they're still a factor of power, but I think there's
Yeah, I mean,
no
if they would
future
learn
in
to
them.
talk a little differently with each other, that would help a lot too,
Yeah,
no?
but
I
I
mean,
think
it's
learning
the
to talk
atmosphere is
is
terrible.
learning to talk is one thing, and that they might be able to learn as individuals, because everybody is an
Hmm.
individual and can learn, and probably they can do it. But once they're in this role of representing a party in this system, which functions in this way it functions, that you can be successful only
Hmm.
if you win against one of the other parties, right?
Hmm.
As long as we don't change those mechanisms of success, the behavior cannot change fundamentally. And
Yeah.
I think all those attempts to teach them meditation and to teach them nonviolent communication, it doesn't work as long as we don't change the fundamental incentives of the system, which
Yeah.
are modern and
Yeah.
therefore
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
outdated.
Exactly.
That's at
So that
least
was
my,
number three or number four?
that was
Was that
number.
three or
Yeah,
four?
number four is spirituality, really
Yeah.
to include the spiritual dimension of humans, right?
Yeah.
And pretty much the anthropology that Aurobindo has already proposed, that we as humans consist of at least four fundamental kinds of needs. We have material needs, bodily needs, we have emotional needs, we have mental needs, we want to know, we want to understand, but then also we have spiritual needs, in the
Yeah.
sense that we want to know why we are here, right? All those
Hmm.
big questions like what is our
Hmm.
purpose in life, and we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves,
Yeah.
and we want to, yeah, have answers to those very fundamental questions, which doesn't happen in modern politics. We have defined this out of politics completely, right? And that's
Hmm.
why so many people are so frustrated, and why we have such high burnout rates and such high depression and even suicide rates, because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
topic is not part of the public space, right? And so we need this kind of anthropology that includes spirituality as one core dimension of
Hmm.
human, so to
Hmm.
speak. And a lot
Hmm.
follows from this, right? We would ask completely different questions. A politics that would take this seriously would would not just try to solve problems with money, with on the material level. That's just one of four dimensions. If we took this seriously, you would look at it in each dimension, like what's the right
Yeah.
approach. Like if there's an emotional problem, you cannot solve it with money, right? If
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
mental problem, you need, yeah, and so on and so forth. So we would really distinguish those different needs. And the good news is that if as money as the material dimension loses importance, we don't have to consume as much anymore. Consumption and all the material side of it that has destroyed our planet, more or less, becomes less and less important, because after all, we have all we need on the material side,
Hmm.
but we consume and consume because we try to compensate other needs that are on a
Hmm.
completely different level. And this can, of course, not work,
Hmm.
because you cannot fulfill spiritual needs with material consumption.
Yeah. And do you bring together, is this something that you do cross religions or cross different beliefs, or what is the kind of the core? Aurobindo has a very specific view on spirituality, yeah, but is this in your work, is it your Robindian approach of kind of waking up to us being this big process that is moving forward, or are you bringing together different faiths just to re-encourage spirituality in people, be it Christian, be it other religions?
Yeah, so far I haven't really focused specifically on bringing together people with different religious backgrounds, just because that's just one
Mm.
task among so many. But I find this idea of the four dimensions very helpful, and I think anybody can relate to it. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what religion you are, and if you are religious at all, but you can relate to this idea that there are spiritual needs, that there are mental, emotional, and material
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
And then you can add, of course, the religious dimension. And we might have a chance tomorrow evening. We have a meeting actually with a couple of people from an Islamic organization here in Freiburg who attended our last dialogue event, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting. Can we cooperate maybe?" So that would maybe be an opportunity to look more into religion and the differences between religions and what do
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
imply for how do we live together, and what are our values, and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
bring this issue a bit more to the front. But so far, this just wasn't on my agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Then the fifth.
So maybe I go to the fifth, and then
Yeah.
that's it. So the fifth fundamental principle is purpose. And you might know that from Frederic Laloux's work around reinventing organizations. He has come up
Yeah.
with three fundamental principles that he observed when he studied TL organizations, in other words, integral organizations operating from integral consciousness or TL consciousness. And it was self-management, it was wholeness, so including
Yeah.
the whole person, essentially my principle four, and then purpose, in the sense that putting purpose at the heart of the
Yeah.
organization, not just of
Yeah.
its activities, but of its existence. Yeah, and that's a very, very important idea, I find, to really ask the question: well, why are we doing this?
Why? The why? Yeah. Yeah. The
Why are we
famous
doing
why.
this? And especially in politics, because I mean, you should think it's clear. Politics is about making the world a better place, all right, or trying to bring about optimal living condition for as many entities or as many living entities as possible. That should be the why. And if you take that why seriously and look at, well, how much of our current politics is serving this goal or this purpose, not very much. So I think that would be a huge shift in perspective to put the why into the heart of politics. And I think integral politics needs to do that, especially nowadays. If you start by principle five, what is this all about? What's the main thing we need to address here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the planet which is starting to burn here. And if you don't put this number one on your list, everything else is meaningless, more or less. And if you
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at our politics, they're talking about how to make gas cheaper, yeah. And because, yeah, anyway, it's really they're completely failing the point. They're completely missing the core point, and that's typical of modern politics. They don't want to hurt anybody. They don't want to. They want people to vote for them, and they think in order to have them vote for them, you cannot take harsh decisions, which is not true, because I just came across a study which said that at least 50% of the people, I don't remember exactly, I think it was a German study, would be willing to pay at least 1% of their personal income for harsher measures to fight climate change, right? And politics is not aware of this. They think it's maybe 5% of the people that would be willing to make sacrifices, but that's not the case. If you tell people what it's for and why it's necessary, and if you do it in a way that is generally perceived as just and not just benefiting certain people, then people are very, very willing to make sacrifices and to work with principle five, more or less, right? To really see, well, what really
Yeah.
matters, and how can we address the things that really matter. And we see
The
that
thing
not.
is, I hope you are right with this 50%. I don't know if you know, I was CEO of Swiss Energy, which is in the Federal Office of Energy in Switzerland, a governmental entity that has money to give grants to energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. And I was the CEO there up to 2016, I think. And we had the political task to inform people what they can do, what they should do, can do to reduce energy consumption and to switch to more renewable energy. But it was extremely hard as soon as it came to people having to pay a little more. So my experience then 10 years ago was not that people are ready to sacrifice even a little bit of their own comfort for the greater good. There was so much pushback. There was so much arguments against the government telling me how long I should shower and this kind of things. Yeah. So it was very hard.
Yeah, I can understand that people don't like to be told what to do, but then I also see a very strong need, maybe, or a very big openness towards this idea of sensing community again, like sensing that you are part of a bigger whole and you can make a contribution to this bigger whole, to the flourishing of this bigger whole. But this only works if you create this experience first. If
Yeah.
people see
Yeah.
themselves as isolated and, me versus the government, it doesn't work, of course. I was
Yeah.
going to say,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
experienced this a lot in one of the other dialogue projects that's going on here in a small Black Forest town, Hinterzarten, where we have been running roundtables for 2.5 years now. It's really a round table with colorful pieces of table where you invite ordinary people into a conversation that is hosted in a more integral way, meaning open dialogue, very slow, very deep listening, non-violent communication, a few guiding rules. And what happens, and the middle is empty, right? It's a table with an empty center, so everybody
Oh,
looks
yeah.
to the center, and that's part of the program, more or less. So let's see what comes out in the center. If we speak to the center, if we speak to the middle, we offer something to the community. And what usually happens after a very short while in these roundtable conversations is that people start to talk about what really matters to them, what they're really worried about, how they really feel, what they are afraid of, maybe, about what really matters. Principle 5, right? Which is not normally a part of a common conversation in a more official or a more mainstream political setting, because it's not a safe space. But as soon as you
Yeah.
create those safe spaces, and as soon as the first person starts to show up, the next person will follow, and the third person will say, oh, I have a similar experience, and blah blah. And so we see this happen all over the place in Hinterzarten at these roundtables. And after, like, I don't know, a couple of minutes where people have shared these things, they start to think, oh, we share a certain problem, let's do
Yeah.
something about it. We can do something about it because we, yeah. It's not
We are a we. Yeah. Yeah.
we all live in this place. It's a small place. They all more or less know each other, and but they have never talked to each other in this way, right? So, and once they
Yeah.
realize, oh, we share a problem, we share a challenge, let's do something about it. Let's not wait for the mayor, or let's not wait for politics to solve the problem. And so they have come up in the last 2 years with at least 10 projects to to live in their community, to come to construct a baking house where every once in a month people can bring their bread and bake it together, and while the bread is baking they sit and talk, right? So the
Oh,
first
that's
thing that
cool.
was
Yeah.
missing in their
Yeah.
place, and that's missing everywhere, is so-called third spaces. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
spaces where you don't have a consumption Konsumzwang, how to say, where you don't need to consume anything to be
Yeah.
able to sit there and talk, like a restaurant or so, but it's for free. You can just sit there and talk to somebody. And so they created many places like that. Like they created their own roundtable. They built their own roundtable. So they said, we want this every month. We want our own. Yeah. And so
Oh, that's cool.
they
Yeah.
created a boule track, and all sorts of different projects. And it's really amazing how every time, like last time, there was a woman who said, "I want to share a dream," because at this round tables, miracles become possible. And so it
That's good.
happened that this time the new mayor wasn't there, but he attended already twice. And so the first thing we did, I wrote a little blog article about this event, including the dream of the woman. And my colleague sent it right to the mayor, and he said, "Oh, I'm interested. Let me hear more about your dream and what can we do about it." So I'm really curious what happens next time when we meet. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's how things happen, and how people feel the empowerment and the
yeah,
joint responsibility for their own places, right? And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very encouraging.
Do I hear you strongly advocate for bottom-up change? Do you believe change will come bottom up?
Um, yeah, as I said, I don't believe in parties because they are
No.
part of their reluctance of the old system, or relics of the old system. So something change has to come from bottom up, or from us, the people. I'm not saying that nothing can happen from top down, because it's always good also to, to bring those who are willing, who are in power positions, who are open towards these ideas, to bring them to the table and to include them into the movement. And probably we need both. I'm not an either or I'm not a,
Yeah,
yeah, fundamentalist of any kind. Whatever works is welcome, I would say. But experience shows that true deep transformation has never come from inside the system. It has mostly come from the edges of the system, or
yeah,
from small pockets of the famous islands of coherence, right?
yeah,
Where new
exactly.
things are experimented and new ways are being put into life, yeah, more or less, and until they then radiate and infect the rest of the
Yeah,
society, and become an attractor, more or less, right? Because
yeah,
something
yeah.
that is more alive becomes an attractor, and then other people will want to come and join and be part of this. And that's what we see happening with all those
Yeah,
dialogue
that
spaces.
would be the ideal. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a real attractor when
let's
people see
become an
something that
attractor.
I want to have that. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
A lot of what we were talking about is lower quadrants. What is your view on personal development? What role does personal development, individual development play in all of this?
We had that question before, in a way, and I think, well, in order to facilitate these kinds of processes and changes, you need a certain level of development. You need a certain ability to hold complexity in the first
Hmm.
place. Otherwise, you're in over your head and you're not able to navigate this. I mean, hugely complex situation that we have all over the place. So you need a minimum personal development in order to be able to function at all in this
As a
situation.
facilitator or as a space holder, at
Yeah,
least.
as both. You need
Yeah,
to be able to observe your own inner workings and your own inner reactions in order to hold space for other people who might have similar reactions outside, and so on and so forth. So
yeah,
meditation helps a lot, and
yeah,
development helps a lot. I'm not saying there's this specific development that you need to do or so, but yeah.
hmm,
I notice in other contexts where people are less focused on personal development, I mean, at least less focused on personal development in this sense of the term, right? Meaning
hmm,
inner development and, observing your own mind and how it's working and so on. And there's also a personal development in the sense of, developing a career, for example. And if that's the focus, people usually don't have this inner capacity, or they haven't at least trained it specifically, and they
hmm.
might be in over their heads in different contexts, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's a capacity that you need to train, but that you can train, and And usually it doesn't require formal training, but life is the best trainer for these kinds of skills. Normally, if you are in difficult situations or in difficult relations or family contexts, that's usually a very good teacher for these kinds of
Yeah,
capacities.
yeah, that's true. Probably one last question, a big one, but we can make it as big or as small as we want. What are your thoughts about AI in all of this development and in the third attractor and in where we are going?
Yeah. Important question, big question, and difficult question. And I have to say, quite personally, I don't have the bandwidth for some of that
Yeah,
because I'm not a tech person. I'm not a tech
yeah,
nerd. I'm already in over my head quite fast when it comes to a new operating system on my computer or a new kind of whatever system
yeah,
or software, and it's just not my cup of tea.
yeah,
I have used AI quite a bit, but I'm by far not using it as actively as I know some of my colleagues are using it. Partly because I don't like to spend too much time on the screen. It's not good for
yeah,
me.
yeah. I
And
also mean it more as a question when it comes to the social coherence, or what will happen as AI is growing. We will have some real social challenges
yeah,
with work
I
that
think
is
it's
being reduced, being taken over by AI. I think it's a danger for our social constructs that are already kind of not very stable.
well, I think it's as with most other technologies that have newly emerged, there is a huge promise in it, and there's a huge shadow, and maybe even a huge, not maybe, there's a huge danger also
Hmm.
of misuse, of instrumentalizations of all kinds, of using it for really detrimental goals, and we're seeing that all over the place already.
Hmm.
So again, it's up to us, to find the right uses for it.
Yeah,
And it also makes the question more urgent, like who are we as people, right? What is
yeah,
the USP, so to speak, of a real human as compared to AI?
yeah,
And if we
very
delegate
true.
all the work to AI, what are we left to do? Like, what will we be doing if there's nothing left to do because it has all been delegated? I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
It was what's the topic of the last Heiligenfeld Congress, by the way.
really, yeah.
Yeah, who are we in times of, right? Who are we?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know, at times I also read comments about AI who say, oh, well, maybe the big hype is a bit exaggerated also, and maybe it's going down now again. I don't know. I have to say, I don't have the capacity to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
after
yeah.
all of this. It's just too much for me. I'm currently also facing some health issues, and I'm trying to walk my talk as best as I can and to really
Yeah,
self-care on the number one of my agenda, and take
yeah.
it from there, and see what I can do based on good self-care. And I just cannot attend all these
No, no, we
new
cannot attend
developments. It's
all of
just
these
not
topics.
possible.
Yeah,
And already, yeah, you have already a huge challenge of even following with all the information that is relevant for your field. It's already by far not
it's
possible.
already too much. Yeah,
So I don't know. I allow myself to say, sorry, I'm off, I'm on the
yeah,
beach, for
yeah,
example,
yeah.
put it metaphorically, and to really make sure that I take care of my integral health, right, as
Hmm.
a person in all the dimensions, and then see, well, okay, what choices can I make as a
Yeah,
healthy in order to use, yeah, some of AI as
yeah,
to the extent that it's helpful and that it's
yeah.
relevant.
That makes sense. So, is there anything that you wanted to cover? I think we are coming to a nice end here, but I want to just open up if there is anything that you wanted to bring in and
Maybe just the
that we haven't
question
covered.
or the curiosity, as you mentioned earlier, that you have also started to draw an essence of the previous conversations that you had so far about this third attractor. I would be quite curious to hear what those essences are, right? And how can we bring together all those people that think about the third attractor into a process of actually co-creating it, right? What could be a next step from talking to doing? I'm really
Yeah,
interested
yeah, yeah.
in how can we bring this to the ground and to embody it and to put it into reality.
Yeah, I think my biggest insight from all the conversations is more and more that we cannot strategize it into being. Like it's not something that we can
Yeah.
think about it and create in the sense of the modern kind of creating or innovating. Almost all of the conversations point to us, as you did, to learning to listen deeply, and listen to each other, listen to the field, listen to what wants to happen, and be then fully available for co-creation. It's not a passive stance. Almost everybody is kind of pointing to kind of this position of a deep connectedness to each other and to the world, to nature, to world, to cosmos, and from there respond with what we have to give, like be available for this co-creation as who we are. And that can look very differently for each and every one of us.
Mm.
And and
Mm.
holding the complexity of our world, like just not collapse in the but be able to hold the complexity.
Yeah, and I always like to close on this call to action to all those people who are already there, more or less, right? Who are already
Yeah,
talking and thinking about this third attractor, meaning that they have already gone through some kind of personal development and are probably able to hold a certain quality of spaces for other people who aren't.
yeah,
We have the duty now to go out there and generate those spaces for people to have this experience. Oh, we can relate differently than what we thought.
yeah,
We can convene, we can co-create, and so on and so
yeah.
forth. And it's not a big deal for somebody who is who's familiar with
Yeah, yeah, and
doing
hold the
like-minded
spaces.
ideas,
Yeah,
but we need them to go out into the regular society and offer
yeah,
spaces like that for other people who aren't, to create those safe spaces, because that's the number one skill we need nowadays, I guess, to make this bottom-up change happen.
yeah. No, I agree. And not to stay in our bubbles, not to stay in integral bubbles and kind of
Yes. And
pat each
complain
other
that we're
on the
not heard and
back.
seen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, very true. Yes, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.